Good morning. So, let's talk a little bit about startups and more specifically startup teams, or basically people working together in a startup. So, why am I talking about this? Well, I have some first-hand experience on how to run a startup that is going to be around for longer than a few years. And I thought I'd share some insights that I've had when it comes to building a strong team. Now, this is not a universal answer by any means, but I thought it might be useful for those of you who are out there thinking about starting your own IT company, and maybe some of my thoughts could help out. So, the first and foremost thing that comes into play when you're picking your teammates or when you're finding people who are going to contribute to your startup is that you need to have a very set your goal ahead of time. Be very aware of what the end game is. What type of application are you building? The idea is the most solid thing that you can have, and I cannot stress this enough. It is very, very important that you have a clear understanding of what you're going to build, because if you ever get to a point where you get uncertain about what you're about and what the product is about, that uncertainty is going to create a lot of frustration between the teammates, because it's in the start of everything. It's a lot about having a good idea. That's where it all starts. You have to have a good idea that solves a very specific type of problem. Now, ideally, I will kind of give this away for free. You want to solve a problem that is, in essence, what most of the startups that I know that make it big or actually become something truly spectacular or get somewhere are the startups that are solving a small problem that most of the large companies, really large applications, have support for, but they're not solving it in as a nice fashion. So take Instagram, for example. Now, Instagram basically provided a service that Facebook was unable to provide in as a nice package, and that made them really big. And that's kind of the mentality that usually gets you the furthest, because people are often surprised at how many people out there are willing to switch over to a new application if the experience and simplicity of that application is much greater than what they're already used to. Because the worst thing people know when it comes to applications is complexity and frustration. That's just a tip. So when you start out, the idea is key. Start off by making sure that you have people on the team that have a really good understanding of what it is you're going to build. Ideally, you want, in my mind, the perfect startup team is a UX designer, a developer, and a sales representative, or a business person of some sort. That is the ideal scenario, because then you have, when you first start out, it is extremely difficult for you to do something that is actually at the same time very, very key. So before you even start doing any type of development, make sure that you have artboards, that you have the concept, because if you start coding before you have the designs and the artboards and the sale pits and so forth, you're starting in the wrong end. Because trust me, you are going to find out things as you go along. The team is going to learn new things, the product's idea is going to change over time, and you're going to try some stuff out. It's very unlikely that you will get everything right on the first go. So make sure that you start off by using user testing, which is usually done with artboards and design principles and designs and so forth. That will save you a lot of time, because even though it's time consuming for a designer to make an artboard and a concept, it is much more time consuming for a programmer to build the thing before it's actually tested. So make sure that you're doing user testing and that you have people on your team that understand the value of doing your work up front. You should already have an idea of how to make money off your application. You should already have an idea of how you're going to start, by how you're going to get the initial funding, because it's not free to host whatever service you're building or whatever application you're building. It's going to take some time and money to actually get things started, and it's not always that easy. Anywho, So start off by making sure that you have somebody on the team that has the ability to provide that vision, that design, that art principle, like the artworks and so forth. Because then the next thing comes along, which is you have to provide a proof of concept. That's the next thing. Now, the first thing, and that's where the programmers or the engineers usually come in. You have to build something. Ideally, the first, like, you slice things up in small chunks and you ask yourself, what's the absolute first key feature? What's the king, if you will, in our application, the most important thing? You build that and develop it to the point where you can sell people on the idea of using it. Because you're not going to be able, usually you dream very big, and you can't build everything on the first try, and it's not feasible to do that. You do it in an iterative process. You add a little value for every release. So you start by doing that, and then it comes down to, like, you kind of have to find that sweet spot. This is not always the case, but ideally what you want is to get to a point where the application is not finished. It's not the vision that you had originally, but it's good enough that just a few users, you just need a few. It's so small percentages we're talking about, maybe 10 people per month that are using your application. If you can get that number, all of a sudden your situation changes from, you know, being this unproven thing to actually having some metrics to show to investors, because that's when our sales representative comes into play. You are going to need somebody who is good at pitching, who is good at presenting things from a business perspective, because if you want things to kind of go even further, you're going to need someone, most likely going to need someone to invest in the product, or at least you're going to have, if you're selling something, you're going to have someone who pitches the idea to different vendors or different companies so that they are interested in using your product. That is a full-time job. Don't underestimate how important it is. And ideally, this is my biggest tip. When you start off, make sure that you're all very clear about what your role within the company is, because it's very important, at least I feel that it is very important, that everybody on the team feels that everybody is contributing with something valuable. And that is especially important in the beginning, because most of the hard work in the very, very beginning of things is involved in the design and the UA, and the programming and so forth. Because at the beginning you don't have much in terms of, you know, you don't have anything. You need to build it before you can sell it, right? So it's important that everybody feels like they can start off immediately. Like, if you have somebody who's like kind of in a situation where they feel that they can't progress, then you have to rethink your approach to, you know, to working as a team. Ideally, you want to put everybody in a position where they feel continuously that they have a roadmap that they can follow, plan ahead, and make sure that everybody can feel engaged at all times in the application. Because if you have somebody who's sitting idle, that's not good. Try to think about those things. Yeah, and those are my tips basically.